Today I'm 68. So it happens fast. But I began to doubt my salvation. And I've talked to some guys in the church about it. And matter of fact, some of the people here witnessed the story I'm about to tell you. But also wondered why, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we have healing, we have miracles, we have angels. And we don't seem to have those things today. And, I began to doubt things. But on March the 2nd of last year, all that changed. I woke up, I fell asleep in the recliner, which is normal when you get my age. And about 2:30 in the morning, I woke up coughing. And it was a gurgling cough, very abnormal for what I normally do. I cough a lot. And so I got up, I went to the kitchen sink, and I coughed up nothing but red blood. And it was a bunch of it. And I kept coughing and kept coughing. Karen comes in and said, "You okay?" And I said, "No, you ain't gonna call 911. So she did, and I went outside so not to make a mess in the house. And I know that sounds kind of gross, but that's the way it was. And I went out on the porch, and I kept coughing, and I kept coughing. And I said, "You know what, I'm fixing to die, and there's nothing I can do about it. Absolutely nothing. I'm fixing to bleed." And I just leaned up against one of the columns on my front porch and said, "Lord, please forgive me of my sins, even the ones that I don't know I've committed." And I want you to know, instantly the coughing stopped. And the bleeding stopped. And I'm not talking about it in a little bit, I'm talking about right then. So, I know there are miracles, and I no longer doubt my salvation. And I guarantee you that. And another miracle, I call a miracle. Some people can understand this, some people won't. But I live in Call. Within 15 minutes of the 911 call, Trout Creek was backing up their ambulance in my front yard. And that doesn't happen here. Our average time is about an hour and a half for response time. And so, like I said, I call that a miracle. And I'm not going to go through some details that were kind of funny, but they loaded me up and took me to Jasper. And went to the ER in Jasper. They started cleaning me up a little bit because, like I said, it was a mess. And immediately, the doctors in the emergency room told my wife, said, "Listen, this is late stage lung cancer, and we need to get him to Beaumont now." So they loaded me back up and took me to Beaumont. And I went to the ER in Beaumont, and I'm still not coughing anymore. But the pulmonologist, or the lung doctor in Beaumont, looked at me, and he examined me. He said that we need to run some tests, which all doctors have to run tests. You know how that is. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to study for them, but that's just how that goes. And but they ran all the tests they could in Beaumont. But they got my family together and told them that he has late stage lung cancer, and he probably will never leave the hospital. Those are the exact words. And he needs to get to MD Anderson Hospital. So I guess I spent, Karen, about a week, a little over in Beaumont, and MD Anderson didn't have any room. So one of the doctors told my wife, said, "Listen, I've got a friend at Methodist, and let me make a phone call so we can get him in over there." Well, if you got cancer, MD Anderson is the place you want to be, not Methodist. So Methodist called back a couple of days later and said they had it. So Methodist hospital I had witnessed. And got there, they put me in a room, assigned me a pulmonologist, which this lady was a pulmonologist for both President Bushes. She's pretty good. But they weren't sure that I didn't have tuberculosis. So they put me on the COVID floor. And that's not a pleasant place to be. And I had to stay there for about 3 days. They ran some tests. And I remember on the third day, second or third day, they had to draw some fluid from the sac there's a sac that the lungs sit in between the lungs and the wall of the sac. She drew some fluid and it was solid red. And she said, Neil, this is definitely late-stage lung cancer. Did you used to smoke? I said, well, yeah, I smoked for about 20 years, 25 years ago, I quit. And she said, well, you only get this if you're a smoker. Well, okay. And first of all, I want you to know that no longer doubting my salvation, the fact that I had late-stage lung cancer and I wasn't going to leave the hospital really didn't bother me. I know that doesn't make any sense, especially to younger people, but it really didn't bother me much. But she ran some more tests, and she had actually had the tools to go into my lungs and follow down to where the tumor was and do some biopsies all around. And so she was able to do what needed to be done. And but I was going to have to wait 3 or 4 days for the test. So on the third day, which was, I think it was the 13th, 13th of March. And just the night before, or that early that morning, woke up and had indigestion. And I called the nurse and they gave me something for it. A couple hours later, it was worse. So I called the nurse again, gave me some more stuff for it. Of course, I have to call the doctor, ask permission to do this. And at about, I guess, around 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, I called again and said, hey, this is getting worse. It's not getting any better. I need something stronger. And all of a sudden, the doors come busting open. Here comes the doctor, and they run an EKG and all that. So we got to get you down to the cath lab. You're having a cardiac event. And they got me down to the cath lab. Poor nurse, bless her heart. I don't know if you guys have been to the medical center in Houston, especially Methodist. The basement does not connect to anything. And she went to the basement. And the cath lab is another entirely different building. So she lost as a goose in a snowstorm. Finally, when the doctor said, you've got to get up to the second floor, and they all connect together. So we go up to the second floor, and she pushed me around, asking the doctor where to go. She was new. And so we get to the cath lab, and there's an artery they call the Widowmaker curve vein. And it was blocking 2 places 100%. And they put a couple of stents in there. And I don't know if any of you guys, if you're younger, take care of yourself. Because having stents put in is no picnic. They lay you on a table, spread eagle. You're strapped down where you can't move. You're not put to sleep. You're given a local anesthetic. I think they went into my wrist for this one. And they give you a local here so that doesn't hurt. But everything that's going on inside of you, you're aware of. And you're sitting there kind of trying to turn your head and look at the screens over there where the basketball goal is, okay? Big screen TV. And it seemed like it was 9 or 10 hours. The doctor said it was about 45 minutes. But I came out of that and went, I think, did I go back to my room, same room? Yeah, I went back to the same room. And like I said, that's not a nice place to be. They thought I had, I may have mentioned this, I don't know, they thought I had tuberculosis or possibly could have tuberculosis, and that's why they put me on that floor. But, so, it was also the morning I was getting ready to go home that all this took place. So things rock along. The heart doctors and the pulmonologist and the lung doctors are sitting there. The lung doctor's not satisfied with the test results he did. And of course, now I'm on Plavix and Eliquis, which are pretty good blood thinners, taking Eliquis twice a day. And they can't do the test they need to do, being on the blood thinners. So they're kind of haggling amongst each other what to do. And he finally said, listen, we can do what's called a watchman. And we can install this watchman, and it stops all the blood clots that go to the brain. And then he can get off the Plavix in about 6 weeks instead of 6 months. Best option. So I said, okay, let's do that. And I'm still never going to leave the hospital. And so I go in and they do that. And things rock along pretty well. And about 10 days later, I'm getting ready to go home again. And I still have this, they call it a loop monitor, I believe, or it's telemetry. And I've got me monitored in a bag hanging on the side, and it's got a transducer in it. And but I'm in the bathroom getting ready to go home, and the nurse comes running in and asks Karen, I said, Mr. Robbins okay? She said, sure, he's in the bathroom getting ready to go home. And she swings open the bathroom door, and I'm laying there dead on the floor. They're on the door now. So they do the code blue thing and all that. And I woke up, was it the next day or the day after? The next day, and I had been on a ventilator, and when they try to wean you off the ventilator, things happen in your head, and have all sorts of dreams, but all my nurses were about this tall, and they were Oriental, either Filipino, Vietnamese, or something. But every cotton picker one of them was like that. And I had a group dressed in gray, and there was a group dressed in black. And this is going to sound funny, but it'll make sense in a minute. But the group in black were trying to pull me down and pull me into hell. And of course, I'm tied down. I'm fighting everything and can't do anything about it. And then the cotton picking group in gray is throwing spray foam down my throat, trying to stop me from breathing. And that went on what seemed like forever. And but they finally got me off the ventilator, and they didn't know what kind of brain damage I was going to have or anything like that. But I missed one of the questions, and that was what's the day? And I had lost the day. I thought it was Saturday, and it was Sunday, or Sunday, and it was Monday, one or the other. But I woke up and saw my son standing there, and he's in Clarksville, or from Clarksville, Tennessee, where he's living. And I just looked at him and said, "This ain't good." And no, it's not. But we're glad you're awake. And but I've got all my faculties. And but they did CPR for 28 minutes, and they had no idea how it was going to be when I woke up. And the spray foam, you know how the spray foam makes a noise when it comes out of the can? Well, they had a suction tube about this long, and I would start to cough and gag on the ventilator, and it would suck it up, and that sounded like spray foam to me. And but we did that, and so everything rocked along pretty good. Then about 3 days later, right at shift change. If you've ever been in the hospital, you lay in a bed that's elevated, and you're always sliding down, and me being pretty long, they had an extension on the bed, but you still push your feet on the end of the bed, and then you leave your knees all crumpled up and everything. And so I asked them if they could pull me up in the bed. So like I said, they're real big girls. And so what they did was they flattened out my bed and then lowered my head. Made it inverted where they could pull me up easier. Well, as soon as they did that, I started getting a funny feeling in my head. They raised it up, or raised me up, the bed up, and all of a sudden bells and whistles and alarms starts going off. And I told Karen, I said, get somebody. And so she runs out in the hall, and we're right across from the nurse's station. And she's screaming, he needs help, he needs help. And by then, you know, the bells and whistles are going off, and everybody knows something's going on. But I had come running in the room, I had 2 sets of doctors, 2 sets of head nurses, 2 sets of nurses. So I had a very crowded room. And it was a pretty big room, but it was still crowded. And I'm sitting there, my heart rate gets up around 240, 245, and I just closed my eyes and lay there. I said, I really, really felt weird is the only way I can describe it. And I had my hands up on the edge of the bed. And I had my eyes closed. And I felt this hand grab these 3 fingers. And said, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And when the hand touched my fingers, instantly, I went warm all the way from the top of my head to the tip of my toes. I mean, just normally warm. I was not, my extremities were freezing to death. And I opened my eyes and I see this guy, and he's Asian nationality. He was bald-headed and clean-shaven, except for the fact he hadn't done either in about 5 days, so he just had stubble all over. But I opened my eyes and looked at him, and I could see him very vividly. But everything else in the background was just kind of gray. You could see movement, could see what was going on, but he said, it's okay, we're going to get through this. And sure enough, everything starts coming down. And comes back down to normal. And I looked around, and he's gone. So I didn't think much of it at the time, but they call it self-corrected, and so everything's wonderful. I'm gonna be okay. But about 3 days later, they put a defibrillator in, and so now I'm a $6 million man. I've got a defibrillator. I've got a wash band, which is kind of interesting. There's a sac on the left-hand side of the heart. It's somewhat like the appendix. And it's not necessary anymore. But it's only good for bad things, just like the appendix. And that's where all the blood clots come from the brain. And that's why go to the brain, called strokes. And that's why they put the watchman in. And, but I go and I have the defibrillator put in. Everything's rocking along now. And I looked at my wife and I asked her, I said, hey, listen, back when I had this episode, as they called it, and I described this guy to her, and she looked at me kind of funny and said, what do you mean? And I explained it all again. She said, Robbie, there was nobody like that in the room. Nobody. So now we're on a 4th or 5th miracle. Plus, God sent me an angel. So, my goodness, I guess it's about 8 or 9 days later. I was in the hospital for 36 days. Lost 65 pounds, folks. You want to lose weight? I can tell you how to do it. But my bill was $1.27 million. So, I don't really recommend it. But, a pulmonologist comes into my room. And this was about 2 days before I'm getting ready to go home. And he said, Mr. Robins, he said, we ran these biopsies and we ran these tests on your fluid and everything else, and everything's come back negative. He said, you do not have lung cancer. And you do have what we call organizing pneumonia. And it's not curable, but it's treatable. And but other than that, lung-wise, you're fine. So there's another miracle. God healed me of lung cancer. So all these doubts I had, You know, they say be careful how you pray. All these doubts that I have, God answered every cotton pig and one of them. So be careful how you pray. I promise you. And 3 days before I'm getting ready to go home, I forgot to tell you. There are rooms upstairs in Methodist Hospital in the cardiac unit that you would not believe. I had 6 13-foot tall windows, about 8 feet wide. I got to watch the last part of the rodeo from my room. And you have your own kitchen. You order food and it's there in 10 minutes. It's wonderful. Well, they decided they're going to move into another room, and I went back to the COVID floor. Well, that was just, that was horrible. But I need to back up to that. One thing I forgot to tell you is never doubt God. I was supposed to go to MD Anderson Hospital. I wound up in Methodist. If I'd have been at MD Anderson when I had my first heart attack and had the stents put in, they're not equipped to do that. I wouldn't have survived. I would have died right then and there. And another thing is, and this is a very emotional experience, but I got to meet, throughout my stay there, some of the people that were on my co-blue team that saved my life. And that was very, very emotional. But, you know, there are angels. Matter of fact, I told my cardiologist, one reason I went into, or maybe the reason I went into cardiac arrest is one of my cardiologists, which I think I had 3, maybe 2. I still have 2. But he took me off of medicine, one of the medicines too quick. So my heart kind of lost control. And but I survived. And I told him, I said, listen, you did everything you thought was right. And don't worry about it, don't feel bad about it. God had put you here for a reason. He's for you. And he looked at me kind of funny. And he really doesn't believe in God. And I asked him, I said, listen, who do you think instilled the desire in you to become a cardiologist and do the things you do? Who do you think guides your hands? I call him Inspector Gadget. He's the one that put all these gadgets in, except for the stand. And who do you think guides your hands every time you go to do this surgery? He looked at me kind of funny. He said, I never thought about it like that. So, well, I promise you, your profession is a God-given and God-driven profession. And you're one of my angels and one of my answered prayers. But God does have angels in the world today. They may be a little bit different than when they were in biblical times, especially the Old Testament. But we have doctors, we have nurses, we have people that stop on the side of the road to help somebody else to save lives. There are angels in every aspect of life. We just don't know or know how to recognize them because we take their profession for granted. And we need to recognize the things that God really does. But if you have any doubts, like I said, there's some people in this room that witnessed everything that went on. And my poor wife, you know, I lived through it, and like I said, it doesn't bother me when I was dead. I was dead. I didn't know what was going on. But she was still here. And Larry Grissom said one time that death is for the living. Well, death causes the living to grieve. But just believe me, the people that are gone, they've gone on. And they have no idea what's going on here. And I know for a fact that I would have been in a better place. And you don't have to listen to this, But I told my wife, I had to spend 3 days at the end on the COVID floor. And one of the days was miserable. There was some poor lady that I don't know what was wrong with her, but if they touched her, she screamed to the top of her lungs. She was right across a little bitty narrow hall from me. And, but the second day I woke up and I looked at my wife, I said, listen, I'm here on the COVID floor, and everybody was upset about it, including myself. All my cardiologists and everything, but wanted to put me back in the mansion and all this good stuff. But I told her, I said, we started on this floor when I got here. And this has to go full circle. She looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, I've got to finish up 3 days on this floor, and the only reason I'm here is to tell my story, and that's the only reason God saved me and put me here. But it's got to go full circle, and I've got to finish up my 3 days here, and then we're going to go home, everything will be all right. Well, now guess who else thinks I'm crazy? Or thought I was crazy. But it's a fact, and it's true. And like I said, you don't have to listen to this, but I have to tell it, because that's the only reason God has me left here on this earth, to spread my testimony. This video, in order to reach people, is on Facebook. And I know some of y'all probably seen it, some of you haven't. If you haven't, send me a friend request and I'll messenger it to you. But I guess that's all I got to say. Just God is real.
Aren't you glad we serve a miracle working God?